Good morning. Yes, my one works. That's good. Thanks all for being here. We have drones and satellites, so high and very high up in the sky. And I think we'll sort of dive in with some introductions. The introductions, yes?
Hi, everybody. My name is Srdjan Kovacevic. I'm a co-founder and the CEO of ORQA. ORQA is a Croatian drone technology company.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Radosław Piesiewicz. I'm the founder of Advanced Protection Systems. We are doing actually counter-drone systems.
And good morning, everybody. My name is Rafał Modrzewski. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called ICEYE, and we represent the satellite element over here, building small synthetic aperture radar satellites for intelligence gathering.
I'd like to dive in with a question to get things warmed up. Are we learning from Ukraine, or are we not? What are European militaries missing, both from a sort of drone and satellite and counter-drone perspective?
Okay, so that's a very good question. Thank you for that. Because are we learning? We should be learning. This is the statement. Actually, we should be learning, because if the equipment is not battlefield proven in Ukraine, then you may not say that it will withstand the current warfare conditions. And from our perspective, from Advanced Protection Systems, for the past half years, so actually 3 years already, we've been delivering our manufactured counter-UAS systems based on radars. That's basically radar systems, and we help Ukrainian military detect, track, and classify Shachets, basically Shachets, but also other drones. And they use our systems to direct interceptor drones on the Shachets. Yeah, so if you are not there, then you may not say that your equipment will withstand such harsh conditions, because it's GPS denied environment. It's dense electronic warfare environment, so everything is jammed. Also, your equipment is used under harsh environmental conditions. It might be very cold, might be very hot in Ukraine. Also, it's being operated by soldiers that might not be holding PhDs. Yeah, maybe not all of them. Most of them will not, and they will be just simply, sent to the battlefield. So your equipment needs to be really easy to be operated. Plus, it's all the time learning from these guys, because the technology of drones of the enemy and the tactics is, I would even say, constantly changing. Yeah. So if you don't adapt your technology, then after a month, 2, 3, it's simply, not up to the task. So it's really about good equipment, being able to operate under harsh conditions, being able to be serviced and maintained by, common soldier. Plus, you need to be able to adapt your equipment very fast, because the enemy, the Russians, they are unfortunately doing very good job on their side. Yeah.
Rafał, you have two good stories on this. I think you were the first crowdsourced satellite in Ukraine, and now you've done this deal with Rheinmetall. So the Rheinmetall deal, does that suggest that, again, NATO militaries are understanding lessons that people like you have learned in Ukraine?
Right. So for those of you guys who weren't aware, indeed, in the first year of the Ukrainian war, there was a situation in which a foundation led by Turkey has gathered money, and it was sufficient amount that they were ultimately able to procure a satellite from ICEYE on behalf of their Ministry of Defense, and this was actually the first Ukrainian satellite. We were extremely proud. They were pretty pleased, and that collaboration since then has grown up, and we're just announcing an expansion on that on Monday. I was contemplating the answer to the question when my predecessor was talking. I think many people are observing what's going on, and yes, we are learning. I think perhaps we are identifying certain lessons learned. But then the second question is, are we really implementing actions that are derived out of those lessons learned? And here the answer is not always. Maybe commenting a little bit on the Rheinmetall. So the Rheinmetall, just so that you guys know, this is the single largest constellation of procurement in European defense. This is a 40 satellite constellation, a 1.4 billion euro contract. So those are all public figures. So many satellites, way more satellites than anybody has ever procured in Europe, and a rather large amount of money that has been spent, I'd say, relatively fast. So now, what have we learned? I think we have recognized in Europe that more money has to be spent on defense, and those budgets have been increased in majority of countries. Poland has definitely been here in the lead, Nordic countries as well, but we can clearly see that in Germany. We have identified that new technologies are going to be critical. So we have identified that drones will be critical. We have identified that satellites will be critical. We know that AI will be used in one way or the other, and I think those lessons have landed, and generally people are aware that the types of weaponry that we are going to use is going to be used differently. Now, what I think hasn't yet changed is the way we procure it. You know, we are still used to buying planes that have 30-year lifetime or ships that have 50-year lifetime. And because something has a 50-year lifetime, we can easily take 5 years to buy it. When you think of drones or satellites, you know, during a 5-year period of time, we are doing 2 generations, right? Like you're just going to get old stuff if your procurement takes so long, right? You may not even be able to defend yourself if your procurement takes so long. So the procurement processes, although I think people realize that should change, are far from adopted to what needs to be. And maybe one more last item is, I think the theme of this panel is, have we really figured out how to use existing industrial capabilities to prepare ourselves for war? Because I think what we are still doing is we are hoping that we're just going to buy a lot of weapons, put them on the shelves, and wait for the war to happen. And when the war starts, these weapons were going to be taken from the shelves and they are ready. That's just not what the Ukrainians are doing. And that's not going to work in the future. And this dual use aspect of how to utilize commercial technologies for something that could potentially convert into a weapon when the time is necessary, it's actually an unresolved problem as of now.
Could you just expand on one point for us? So we know that a lot of the drones are attritable, that you build it, you buy it, you fly it, you don't see it again. Could you give us an idea of the life cycle of a satellite, of one of your satellites? How long do you expect it to be in operation?
Right. So you'd expect the big satellites, you usually expect to be in operations for about 7 years. That's the traditional lifetime, maybe 8, depending on the mission. The small satellites that you are now deploying in larger numbers are about 50% of that. So 4 years, 3.5 years is your typical lifetime. But you start seeing much more similar behavior patterns to what you guys see with your commercial electronics. So nobody uses an iPhone for its lifetime expectation, right? Like at the end of the day, if you bought an iPhone and you decided to use it for as long as it takes until it breaks, that you would be using it for a decade. And most probably 3 years into the use of it, you'd already be very frustrated because the software isn't even getting updated on it. And the same is true for the satellites, right? You could potentially expand the capability of the satellite for it to live longer, but the pace of technological development and the pace of change of what you can do with a satellite is actually very similar in its frequency to the iPhone upgrades. So we do over-the-air upgrades to our satellites. There's actually a software-defined element to the satellites. So you own a fleet of satellites, you wake up one day and you have new features of it. But every 18 months, there's an actual major hardware upgrade. And I'm not talking about switching, Lightning to USB-C. It's actually a major upgrade that goes on the satellite. Very often increasing the resolution, increasing the capabilities, maybe adding even new modalities observing. You want to have the newest stuff, right? At the end of the day, everybody is sort of aware of this, that the war is also being fought on the technological front. But I can tell you, the anti-jamming algorithm development that we have seen over the last 3 years is continuous, right? The satellites that we've been using 3 years ago are jammed every day right now. The satellites that we've launched 2 days ago are never jammed. And they are never jammed because the way we have built and adapted and changed spectrum. So you would want to do a synthetic aperture radar, optical perhaps something that's called signal intelligence, so RF frequencies, maybe infrared, maybe hyperspectral. So you start multiplying and you think of this, okay, there's 100 satellites for each methodology, times 3 modalities, 300, maybe a transport layer. It's not some crazy technological concept that Elon has created with Starlink. The fact that he is launching 3,000 satellites isn't a creation of his imagination. It's actually technically correct way of approaching the problem. So the way you should go about building this today is as large as possible, as distributed as systems as possible, because a single target becomes also a low value target, right? Looking at a satellite that costs you $1 billion, it actually makes sense to try to figure out a way to shoot it down. If your satellite costs $10 million, your missile may be more expensive than the satellite.
And that's the same thing we have with drones. Srdjan, going back to the question, is NATO militaries learning the right lessons, or are they still not understanding this? What do you think?
It's exactly the same point that I wanted to make, thinking about your question. And as a technologist and as an engineer, technology was easy. We before the war, we started as a hobby electronics company. We learned, transformed our technology into solutions that warfighters can use. Warfighters have learned. If we're dealing with a number of end users across NATO, most of them know, what's the use of this technology. They know what the capability they need to develop. So they're also learning. What we're seeing really no movement on is exactly procurement and the novel ways for the end users to engage with the technology providers as they are in Ukraine. And then what happened in Ukraine, this interaction emerged organically as a necessity for survival. So what we're seeing across NATO is very early stages of adoption. We have a 6-stage model of adoption of this new capability, and if I'm putting things on that spectrum, you're going to have Ukraine and Russia in stage mass adoption, stage 6 or 5, and then you're going to have US that's somewhere in the phase 3, pushing it to phase 4. Phase 4 would be adoption across the force, but not scaling it. And then you have Europe, which is at various stages of 0 to 3. So if I'm thinking about NATO, we're seeing a lot of movement in the special operations forces adoption. We're seeing some pilot programs where the maneuver elements, conventional army maneuver elements, are experimenting with the technology, thinking about they will transform the way they work, leveraging that technology. But what's missing, and it's getting the technology into hands of special operation forces. It's easy because their scope and flexibility in procurement is much, much higher than. But once we get to a point where you're going to need to have either these experimentations becoming pilot programs or pilot programs becoming rollout across the force, I don't see the movement on the policy level that would enable this sort of rollout.
And when you have senior leadership from NATO militaries coming out to Croatia to see your kit in action, how do they react?
I mean, well, I think there's some misconceptions about what should be done, and then what encourages me is there's some clever people, surprisingly, on a policy making level, at least when it comes to European Commission movements. So I get a sense of hope, but I believe, okay, the kind of sense of urgency is here. Nobody needs prodding in that direction. And if I'm thinking about this needed transformation of how we think about defense and how technology is enabling defense, and if I think about it in the context of unmanned systems, there's two fields. One is air defense, and the other is transformation of ground forces. We need to transform our air defense, how we think about architecting and executing air defense, and then how we fight land wars, or how we defend against invasions. I believe that there's less obstacles to transform land defense forces. And honestly, I don't see a path for again on the policy level, not on the technology level, not on the tactics level, on the policy level, and in navigating the particular interests of big European primes, etc. Like that, we're gonna see some slow movement there.
And a question for all three of you: at that policy level, do you feel those people are coming to your facilities, seeing your technology in action, and talking to you enough?
Oh, they do. They have to, because it's obviously clear to everybody right now that you have to do something, and do something very actively. So rearm Europe, build and extend the industrial base. You need to produce content locally. You need to produce content locally in order to be technologically sovereign. Then you also need to expand the industrial base into domains like drones and counter drones to maintain operational sovereignty in Europe. It all means that the investments must be done, and it's all clear. And I think it's all clear not only in Poland but across other countries as well in Europe, that there needs to be a lot of money invested, because there needs to be a lot of work done. So and we see how the war in Ukraine goes on. I mean, at the beginning there were not so many drones. There were just the traditional drones used, like Bayraktar and other guys, and they didn't survive maybe a week or just a few days. So at the moment the battlefield is completely saturated by thousands of small drones, plus of course shachets. Yeah, they are all used to different purposes, and they will be used to different purposes. So we have to rearm and defend, and it's not only gonna be the direct line of engagement, but the drones will be used to attack the critical infrastructure everywhere across Europe. And we see already that what Russians are doing, they are paralyzing the airports across Europe very easily, everywhere, in Denmark, in Germany, in Belgium, in the UK. They do whatever they want. And if they want, they will attack the critical infrastructure. And at the moment, I mean, it's very easy to be done. So that all needs to be protected. It means all that equipment needs to be produced locally in big numbers. So the industrial base needs to be expanded.
And on the industrial base, a question for all three of you, really. On the one hand, we need the manufacturing capacity, but on the other hand, I think you all agree it needs to be distributed so it's resilient. Do you think public policy is leading in the right way for the manufacturing capacity to be developed? And do you think the policymakers understand the need for it to be distributed?
I can tell you directly, because we've been engaging with the policymakers over the last month or so. They're not leading, but they are following in a positive way. I think that the idea of distributed manufacturing, of having multiple sovereign capabilities rather than a one big tank factory that's a massive target and easy to neutralize. I think nobody needs selling on that. What I see is a bit of a conflicting, and I would even say an old sort of concept is, in Europe you always have this thing, why should we have redundant capabilities? We could kind of distribute the technology space and then be good at, that's all good, but I think you need to have some redundancy if you want to have resilience. So that kind of there's a bit of clash here, but I'm again curiously optimistic.
And Rafał, is it the same with satellites?
So look, I think there's I'm glad that there's hope on the panel over here.
Are you about to kill it?
we are observing certain change in perception, but people still do perceive that in order to manufacture things, you have to set up those sort of car-like factories with thousands of robots and 10,000 people. That it has to be an industrial area. And I can tell you, like, the first ICEYE satellite was built in a room which was 3 by 4 meters, right, inside an office space. You don't anymore have to have such huge facilities. And honestly, it isn't helpful. It isn't helpful to you. People don't want to work there anymore. People want to work in the city. So that perception, although I'm glad to hear that it's changing, we still don't think it has changed enough for people to actually realize what's happening. The problem which we see is how well we can distribute the manufacturing and make it redundant and resilient on a European scale. And the problem still is just really about the national interests, right?
placing a factory in one country and then placing it in the other country is actually not perceived as distributing, is perceived as moving IP from a place where it should be to a place where it shouldn't be. And unfortunately, that element on a European scale is still in the making, I would say.
And I think there's a problem that the politicians realise that in many countries defence doesn't win votes but jobs do. Therefore, you want to build all the factories in your constituency or your country and not distribute that. So is there a real risk that the electoral politics undermines the security of needing distributed manufacturing?
100%.
Yeah.
The more nationalist-focused policies you will have, the harder it will be to distribute manufacturing in the right way, right? And I think, the funny thing is that I'm sure the three of us already know it. If you do an analysis internally from the perspective of what's the right way for the business to function, it is distributed manufacturing over multiple countries, right? Distributed manufacturing where in certain places you build subsystems, in certain places you do assembly, in certain places you do maybe something smaller, maybe you distribute some other parts of those elements. Actually, funny enough, within Europe, logistical chains are so good today that you can move stuff quite easily around from place to place. And access to talent is actually something that you are optimizing for, right? So, we do have 4 sites. We've got manufacturing in Greece, in Poland, in Finland, and in Spain in Europe. But we are still battling with the fact that every single new country that we are entering, where we are about to build satellites, wants us to assemble the satellites in that country. Like, look, how many of the assembly lines can we really set up? Is there going to be 27 assembly lines for 27 European countries? Unfortunately, this is what it looks like today.
So on the panel I was on yesterday, there was a lot of call for a single market, which would overcome that, I guess.
I agree.
If I can break with the optimism streak
Go
a
for
bit,
it.
so there's one not so clever and promising idea that I heard 2 weeks ago, which is when it comes to the drones and counter drones and drones in particular, the idea coming from the Commission to pair startups and big primes. That goes like first of all, it's like tying a agile startup to a rock. In attempting to move fast, and second, it comes from a false premise that keeps reoccurring, which is that we don't have the knowledge and ability to build these small things at scale, and that somehow primes do. And I heard that trope, come in different forms. Harebrained ideas that you're going to have car makers, helping drone companies ramp. No, you're not. These are not toasters we're talking about. These are flying robots, and these big primes or car. They maybe know how to build mass-produced shells or mass-produced cars, but mass-producing flying robots, it's a different thing, and that's. There's some misconceptions.
Okay, but then do we need to teach them how to do this, or are they just not going to do it?
Or let them fail? And
well, is our resilience in people like you teaching car manufacturers how to build drones, or you don't think they should?
We don't need car manufacturers. I think we should let the free markets develop the capability to build these new things at scale.
So can I ask you, and you don't have to answer questions if you can't answer them, in your small corner of Eastern Croatia, how many drones are you manufacturing a year?
I can tell you how many we can manufacture, because how many we manufacture is a function of demand at the moment.
Enough.
So we built out capacity that's currently, with the supply chain and the physical limitations, limited to 280,000 drones per year.
Say that clearly again.
280,000
And how
drones per
many
year.
can you make a year?
We are constantly expanding our manufacturing capability, and we are producing all the time. There is more demand, and it's saturated, but it's over 200 radar systems per year, which is a lot and growing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let me here give also maybe a little bit different perspective on the same subject, taking into account, for example, Eastern Shield initiative. That's a very big initiative where you need huge investments, because you need to protect a very long border. And here, I think there is absolutely space for good collaboration between the big guys and the small guys, and also the public segment. So it's like public-private partnership with huge investments and umbrella from the national funds, but also from the European funds like SAFE program, for example. Plus, of course, because it's a SAFE program, so it needs incorporation of other countries, so it needs that international exposure as well. So we are talking about initiatives that bring together the private, public, and international business together. And I mean small guys, big guys, under the national umbrellas with investments from the European Union, plus investments from different countries, because we have to protect the whole eastern flank. That's a long border going over a few countries. And here, absolutely, there is space for collaboration. And because there is space for collaboration, there is need and there is urge to collaborate. The big guys will collaborate with the small guys, and the public segment will collaborate with the private one. And I think soon it will be clear.
So, Rafał, you are working with the big guys. There is a model now of some of these, particularly Rheinmetall, working with startups. Again, however much you can talk about it, how does that work for you as a startup?
Look, I think both of those can ultimately work, right? I mean, all configurations can work. A lot of small companies can work together. Small companies and a big company can work together. Big companies can work together, and perhaps even be innovative at a certain moment in time. I think what the call over here is, Commission shouldn't just be prescriptive, right? Like there is no reason for the procurement agency to decide what's the right way for the market to solve for the problem. And we see it all the time, right? There's two tendencies which are somewhat odd. One is the idea of being prescriptive on the sort of commercial structure, which is how many entities should be in a consortium. Many, always, generally, right? Like hopefully representing all countries of the European Union. Again, the same problem that we are talking about, right? And then the second bit is, for whatever reason, there is a tendency to be prescriptive on architecture, right? I think this is a little bit of heritage from the old times of programs, sort of a little bit like Ariane, where we were deciding, okay, we are going to build a rocket and we are going to build it and it's going to be that big and it's going to have so many engines. So we are not letting the market decide how to solve for the problem, but we are actually going to tender a very specific technological solutions. That just makes no sense whatsoever, right? You should buy as much of a service capabilities as possible, right? If you are really after protecting the eastern flank, then scope the concept of protecting the eastern flank against drones and missiles and something else, and allow the companies within Europe to team up in an appropriate way and propose a solution, maybe multiple different solutions, and then ultimately pick one or the other or test them and so on. Like, that's what I'm saying about we have to adapt our procurement capabilities, right?
I think all of this lies in systems that were developed in peacetime. You could argue that when programs you're describing, if they go wrong or they're too slow, it doesn't really matter. Whereas now there's an existential threat and it does really matter, and there's this need to shift from peacetime innovation to wartime innovation. You guys are doing it. The implication is that the public sector hasn't quite caught up because it's so entrenched to do things that way. How can you influence them? Because they're clearly not hearing it.
So I mean, look, from my perspective, the question is, have people really realized that there is a need to move from peacetime innovation to wartime innovation?
You'd hope they would have done.
And I think majority hasn't really, right?
Yeah.
And you know, we have those moments of revelations when drones enter Poland, and then half of Poland suddenly realizes that, oh my God, we should be doing something about this. But nobody in Spain cares, right?
Yeah.
So the situation is still actually quite tricky from the perspective that I don't think we have alignment on the policy or public level, that the change in the procurement situation, the change in the way we innovate in the military is actually a necessity that we have to solve for, and we have to solve for quickly. I think the panels like this are one of the good things. I mean, you know, there's ultimately two things you can do. One of those you don't do, or we don't do, which is there's actually more war happening, and people are realizing that, like, okay, indeed the situation is much more dire than we had hoped. And the other bit that you can do is publicly speak about it in an open manner, which is what we do today, and actually say, no, we do have to start changing those ways. Because it is true what you're saying. In the past, in the peacetime, if a program like this was late by 5 years and, you know, created a system which ultimately didn't work, nobody even realized,
Yeah.
right? And that just won't fly.
It had no impact, and yeah.
I think that, you know, shifting the focus and the narrative towards, you know, really more nuanced and more precise language around certain things, specifically around, you know, I'm talking about the drone space. Like there's this wrong idea of technology moving fast. No, technology is not moving fast. The application of technology is moving fast. Technology was there for 10 more years available on the market. And what I think this shift would help is figuring out where the problem is. And the problem is that, there's no way to procure a capability of like taking a technology from where it exists and putting it where it needs to be employed. And then, if technology needs to move, enabling technology needs to move, then it comes from the point of need. Yeah. So I think it's shifting. It's important to be precise in language so we can shift the focus where the real problems lie. And if you're seeing what's happening in Ukraine, you have all of these different units, different brigades working without intermediary with the solution providers, and they can quickly iterate. There's no modality in European procurement to make that happen on a scale and at a pace which is needed in the next war. Because what changed from the last big war to this war is the availability of technology. Technology is available and accessible. It's never been more accessible. What we're seeing is when you have an existential need and you have this big access to technology just comes in, and if you're putting barriers, procurement barriers, and even barriers for, people that understand technology to talk with the people that need technology, like you are setting yourself up for a defeat.
Yeah. Now, it reminds me of something you were saying to me this morning, that we're aware that with drones, the EW environment changes so fast that they're constantly updating the drones. But you were saying this morning, obviously, that the tactics are changing as well. And that adds a whole other layer to the technology, is needing to understand the tactics as well. Can you talk to that a bit more?
Yes, sure. I mean, this is what we've been observing in Ukraine for the few years already. I mean, it's not just that the technology is changing. The new drones are getting into place, the small ones, the medium ones, even the Shachens are coming right now in different types, because they are constantly evolving. Or you have drones, for example, operated by fiber, So it's constantly changing, but also the tactics are changing. For example, some time back, the Shachets were flying low, and then they were detected by acoustics and taken down by rifle fire or small arms fire or just artillery fire. At the moment, they are not. They are flying very high so that the acoustics don't hear them, and you have to use other means to get them down. Simply, the enemy is adapting to the changing battlefield, and they are doing that very fast, and they are doing that very effectively, and they are doing that in big numbers. I mean, the whole Russian economy is all about war. It's just producing for the war purpose, and they are producing for the war purpose in thousands, So, and what we see at the battlefield, because our guys are, deployed in Ukraine all the time, working together, helping the training, and then learning also from Ukrainian operators all the time. So we are seeing that changing, and we are getting this information from the Ukrainians, how to adapt the technology to serve the purpose, And it can be done. You just need to act fast, and this is what we said before. I mean, during the time of peace, you have time. You can take your time. I mean, the bureaucracy has a lot to tell then. But during the wartime, you don't have time. And you have to act fast, you have to take decisions fast, you have to produce fast, and you have to spend money on things which are effective. Things which are effective because you will need them in big numbers. If the war effort lasts a longer time, it's a war of attrition. And only these nations which have the proper industrial base with the proper production capabilities, they will survive.
And Rafał, is it the same with satellites? Is Ukraine changing the way we understand how satellites can be used in warfare, or is it more that you're developing the technology?
So, I mean, I'm not sure whether Ukraine as such is changing it, but the fact that Ukraine is using satellites in much larger numbers changes our perspective on what satellites are going to be used in the future for, right? And the shift is actually quite massive, which is why I was talking about this German contract, because people are realizing that the satellites won't function the same way as they used to for the last 40 years. And so that's a massive, I think it's a similar thing to drones, actually. The fact that you don't observe a location anymore every 12 hours, 5 hours, 24 hours, whatever it was, but you're going down to every 20 minutes, that moves your decision-making capabilities from what you'd call strategic decision-making to tactical decision-making. We've been actively showing this in NATO exercises. You know, in the past, what you would do is you would ask yourself, you would use satellites to figure out what is the overall amount of tanks that my enemy has, right? That's a question that you're trying to answer. So are they producing a lot of tanks? Do they still have many left? But that's a strategic question that generally deals with the assessment of forces, right? Today, what we do is, where should I strike with my artillery fire based on satellite pictures, right? You literally take a picture, you have it down with you in less than 10 minutes. You do a quick AI scan over there, what's happening. You've been looking at that area, so you know what's changing. You see a change, and we've literally been doing this in the exercises where we've seen, you know, there was an activity going on where trenches were being dug, right? So you see trenches being dug, and so what do? You have your artillery, you redeploy your artillery, and you shoot at the trenches, right, before they are done. So the tactical use of satellite-based information, this is the first war in which we've actually tried this, and it has proven to be extremely effective, right?
I'm going to the drone point again with the satellite analogy. Do NATO militaries understand that, and are they keeping up with the pace of change?
I think slowly, yes. I think so. You know, I was thinking about it as we were talking. The funny thing is that I think the militaries are realizing, but you know, if you look at because we've talked a lot about this procurement system. If you look at actually the way we've structured the procurement system, it's a little bit against what we all know as the most rational way, right? So who is the user of armament? It's the military. But who is doing the procurement of armament? The armament agency, right? One is a different entity than the other. One is a civilian entity under the Ministry of Defense, and one is a military entity, right? Which means that very often the general knows what he would like to have, but he's got to go through a process in a civilian entity to ultimately go for procurement. I remember this vividly, you know, when we were selling the satellites to Poland for the first time. There was a huge debate going on for a long time, how to buy it, what to buy within the civilian entity. Ultimately, the general got pissed and said, like, okay, I'm going to issue an emergency request. I will say that I need this to solve right now an emergency military need. They have an ability to issue that. And that triggered the procurement. And it still took 12 months, right, to buy. So, like, you can see how, you know, what he would want to do is he would want to have his own budget and say, like, okay, I know what I need. I don't need to always go through a super long process. I don't need to let the market 6 months to respond to everything. I'm buying this. Some money will not be spent the most efficiently, but that's actually the way to procure fast and more efficiently. Now, maybe finishing up a little bit on a happy note, because I know that I've been complaining about the procurement. You know, the procurement is actually still bad, but what I think is good to see on this panel is the founders of companies have actually adopted exceptionally fast. It's good to see how quickly the European sort of founder infrastructure and the small companies have taken on the task of adapting the technology that existed into the new military conditions. And I think we've been asking ourselves in Europe, oh, are we still able to innovate? Can we really create the companies that will allow it to defend Europe? And I think the answer is 100% yes. We do have the talent, we do have the people. They're actually able to do exactly the same that their friends in Silicon Valley, although we may be complaining that they aren't in the Silicon Valley. If we can solve the other problems, we are going to be able to build what's necessary.
That's a very good positive note. We've got some time for some questions. Do we have a microphone on the floor anywhere? That looks like a no, so I might give up one of our microphones. Or you can just shout, it's not a very big room. So do we have any questions? Or not? Yes. Okay, off we go. Hey. What are the largest drones you can track?
Yeah, I got a question. So we are dealing basically from the very small ones, FPV drones, up to Shachets. This is what we are dealing with. This is what we are concentrating on, yeah? So we are not talking about the predators flying very high somewhere up there in the skies. We are talking about from the very small guys up to the Shachets, yeah? So this is the things that we catch and neutralize. Yes.
Yeah? Did you have a question? Yes, yes. Charles.
Everyone's made a comment on the fragmentation of the European market. If you were a young entrepreneur and you were European, from a go-to-market perspective, what's the map? Like, where do you start? Do you start in Germany? Do you start in Eastern Europe? Everyone seems to get offended if you're building in another person's country. I appreciate your comment on everyone wants a localized component to it, but what's just your advice?
So I would say start locally, which puts a company, a small company from a small country at a disadvantage. But I believe that you need to start local, build relationships with your end user, because this is where you're naturally going to get the buy-in first, and then try to spread it. I mean, for us, I'm giving the contrary advice, because for us the validation came from abroad. Actually, it came first from the States, and then it kind of trickled back. So we had to go across Atlantic to get validated, and only that we got pulled by our own government and then other countries in Europe.
Our story was the following: that when we built the technology, actually we started building technology for something else. We started with some contracts for the European Space Agency from small electronics, because we are electronics guys. And we built small sensors, small radar sensors from scratch. And then we were thinking where to use them. And then that big thing with drones came. Nobody saw that it's a big thing. It was 2014, but we understood very quickly that it's gonna be the right way, and that there is no legacy systems that would be dealing with the small guys in an effective way. And we understood that the future will belong to the small guys, and the big guys, you can shoot them down with big rockets, but your big rockets are useless against the small guys. Plus, these small guys can easily take down your big rockets. If you don't have proper cover on the lowest layer, your Patriot systems, your whatever other systems you have, they will be executed in minutes when the war effort breaks out, and your billions of dollars invested will be gone. So we somehow understood that very fast, and then we managed to build and iterate the process of building the radars for detecting exactly these small drones very fast. We deployed that across a number of countries. Actually, we made sales, I think, in 20 countries or so, because we were pretty aggressive in going out and showcasing, and then going head to head across the world, everywhere basically. So we were pretty successful, and then big traction came from the Polish military. It was in 2022, so we got a big contract, and then we managed to sell things in Ukraine, then in the Middle East, and what you need at some point is traction with the real users, that the real users will say, it makes sense, it's effective, it works, yeah? Because if it doesn't, then it's useless, yeah? So you need traction very fast. We got traction outside, and then we got big traction in Poland, and obviously right now in Ukraine, and also in the Middle East, because our things work. So I always say, check our equipment, please use it, and then decide.
So, the question is a bit tricky, because in principle, I know where you're coming from. Like, it's probably, like, it sounds like it should be easier to start inside a country which already has a large defense spending, because you are going to be local, and your first market will be a large market. Now, obviously, that is completely not true for us. We started from an extremely small market, and what you see is that there are actually sides to both of those activities. Let's say you'd go and start an extremely small market like Estonia or something like this. Your ability to collaborate with your government will be on a whole different level than in Germany, right? You might be able to get the prime minister, the president to become your salesman. You may be able to shape laws. Like, there are actually good things to starting in smaller economies, but you have to deal with the fact that the market ultimately isn't going to be as large, and then there are going to be other things that you will have to compensate for. And maybe teaming with Rheinmetall will be one of the things to do, right? So when we started new offices, we've almost always said, okay, this is not going to be the driving element. We always looked for where can we find the best talent to solve for our problem, right? I don't know where you guys are based, where your team is based, but we've always located offices where our people were, and that has turned out to work very well.
Jacek.
Thank you. So maybe on the beginning, I want to say that I was observing from a perspective of National Security Council development of your companies in Poland for the last 3 years as an agile, very well-managed ventures. And we're really proud that now, after 4 years, here in Davos, we can share the technology and the success of the companies like that. So thank you for that, gents. Great job done. But it's not the end of a story. It's not even end of the beginning. So my question is, if there is a similarity between what is happening with the drones and satellites, do you think about the interceptions on the orbit? Because this is what Russians are already working on. So how you position your companies, there are not many options to listen from counter-drone and satellite manufacturer. How you see the technological trajectory for interceptions of the hostile satellites and hostile ISR capabilities from the low orbit? Do you work on that? And how you assess the market?
Yeah, so I definitely can comment on this. Look, from the perspective of the development of technology and where this will go, I'm actually certain that such capabilities will be developed quickly, probably within less than next 5 years, will be deployed quickly, probably within less than next 5 years, and they will actively be used. I think both the interception, but also just the ability to, it will probably start with on-orbit jamming, then we'll start with on-orbit electromagnetic warfare, so sort of trying to actively fry the circuitry of the opposing satellite, ultimately to all the way to kinetic activities. And I think that that development shows that we have to speed up a little bit the adoption of the space-based technologies in Europe, because we are still behind on step one, right? We should already have the European case constellation, mega constellation for Earth observation, and we should be thinking of that next step, because in a war condition, at the end of the day, the one wins who is one step technologically ahead, right? And we haven't. The truth is that I'm glad you are bringing this up, but the conversation. So we are working on this on the technology front, but on a procurement level, I don't think people even realize that such a concept should start being thought of, right? And that's the unfortunate thing, because they are just a few years behind.
We have one at the back, and then if we have time, we'll have one more. Can we keep the questions and answers quick, because we have about 7 minutes? You probably just need to shout, yeah.
I have a question. One question. What is the current stage of foreign intelligence for drones?
What is the current stage of foreign intelligence for drones? Current state of foreign intelligence for drones and resolution for satellites.
So on swarms, it's very, very early stage. I think there's some public conceptions about swarms of drones that are kind of misguided, and I don't think we're there yet. The technology simply, the application of technology simply is not. Even the enabling technology is not quite there yet. Yes, we can do light shows. But think about drone swarms in the context of a battle. I mean, if you ever seen a drone swarm being set up, it takes a stadium to set it up, and anything the size of a Hilux truck is going to get targeted like tens of kilometers deep in the. So there's some misconceptions, but I think that we need to start small, start with like just transforming how our maneuver elements really absorb technology and use that technology to transform the way not only how they strike, but also how they defend against these capabilities.
Satellite resolution.
Yeah, so I will try to be quite quick. So there's two main types of Earth observation satellites: optical and radar. State of art for radar is about 15 centimeter resolution. You can probably get better than that. State of art for optical, around 20 centimeter resolution, so they are comparable to one another. I think to give you a sense of this, like you can't read a newspaper from space, you cannot see a license plate from space, but anything car-like or smaller you can easily detect and most often identify.
Yes.
I'm Ukrainian manufacturer of the drones, so who expanded to Poland and faced enormous resistance and enormous. So I fully echo what you just said. My question is, you're supposed to be a union, but it's extremely fragmented, especially in defense. Take into account this, how you would assess the competitions with the United States, because there is a competition, and a lot of restrictions, and how you are tackling that challenge.
This is the last one. Quick answers.
Oh, there's no quick answer
I know,
to
it's
that.
an easy question.
I mean, as I said, we've been operating in the States even before we started operating in this space in Europe. We've been facing an increasingly complex compliance environment. I would say that in terms of supply chain independence, US has gone furthest than anybody else. Like Europe is still thinking about like the piece of legislation in Europe that sort of indirectly addresses the supply chain is the provision in the EDIP that 65% of components need to be, and no, even that, like nobody knows how that would be operationalized in the procurement or any other context. So that's put aside. US has gone really at length and has been doing so for years to make sure that supply chain, is not vulnerable to, and we're talking about dependency on China. So I would say that the compliance environment is getting extremely complex, and even more so, and geopolitics do not help. I do believe that the squaring of the circle would need to happen on like figuring out as a company, figuring out how can you get the user country confidence that they will have the capability that you're offering as a sovereign capability. And it's a circle that can be squared, but the solution I don't think is simple.
I would just say one sentence, basically, considering geopolitical environment in which we are at the moment and which is dynamically changing, technological and operational sovereignty and independence in Europe is a must. As simple as this. Full stop, nothing more.
Look, there is no short answer, but like you're 100% right. I think we believe we have a single market in Europe. When it comes to defense procurement, that's 100% not true. I'm glad to hear that people are realizing this, and actually yesterday and today I've already heard a lot of people say this quite out loud, that we have to change that. And look, I mean, my assessment is clear. Unless we change that, the race against the United States for developing of new technologies within defense will be lost, right? So we have to change that, and the quicker we change that, the better the chances that our companies will actually have an ability to compete internationally.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. That was bracing and interesting, and we'll end on a positive note. It's sunny outside. Thank you, everyone.